Anarchy across the nation. The Secret Service attacked in D.C. A historic church lit on fire. Cop cars in New York City firebombed. Looting in downtown Manhattan. St. Patrick's Cathedral desecrated. The World War II monument in D.C. desecrated. Over 140 cities with protests and violence and anarchy on the streets of this country. We will break that down for you and more coming up. Welcome, everybody, to the Buck Sexton Show. I hope this will be perhaps our sanity today, getting a chance to discuss what happened over the weekend. The fact that we aren't seeing a unified voice of all the political parties in this country, of all of the people with influence, with platforms, calling out what's going on here, which is just an expression of mass rage, a frenzy of hatred and destruction. This will not benefit anyone if they believe in justice. This is not going to make police relationships with communities any stronger. This will do nothing that is positive and so much that is destructive. I heard the protests over the weekend. In fact, I bumped into them on the streets several times. Yes, some of them just hold up signs about police terrorism. Does anyone want to explain to them that in any given year, there are less than 100 and most years less than 50 people who are killed, who are unarmed under mysterious or questionable circumstances by police in a country of 320 million? That's a pretty small number, isn't it? But we are supposed to believe, we're supposed to buy the initial premise that cops are a racist scourge, that they are a threat, constantly menacing and looking to murder even because of sheer racism young black men in this country. That is a lie. It's not true. And the moment you start to break out statistics, the moment you look at the realities of police-civilian interaction, the demographic breakdowns of different crimes, the ways that they are prosecuted. This is all built on lies right now. They have one point of truth that has been used for all of what we've seen across the country. The destruction of stores, an old lady beaten by a mob with pieces of wood in Rochester, a man in Dallas almost kicked and beaten to death by a mob outside of his own store. Truck drivers pulled out of trucks trying to drive through mobs that had blocked traffic, which is illegal. And, if you block traffic and something bad happens, if you're standing across a highway and you mob someone's car and that person panics and tries to escape, tries to flee to safety, and some of the moron protesters are hurt in that process, that is the fault of the protesters. That is the fault of the people that have caused the initial incident. And yet we're told that this isn't going to stop. We're told that this is just the beginning, really. I heard the protests, as I said, walking through the streets here in New York. In fact, I walked through a few of the protest marches just trying to get home or trying to get through my day. They chant horrible things about the police that are untrue or that are enormous smears, right? Yes, are there cops who are racist? Sure. There are racists in any profession. Are there incidents of police violence that are horrific and that should be punished to the fullest extent of the law? Yeah. But does anyone like bad cops? I hate bad cops. I think that bad cops are a menace. I think that bad cops should be sought out and punished severely. And I haven't heard anybody who disagrees with that. And no one that I've seen who has any influence or any platform or any sway, including the president of the United States, who was on this show, a week ago, talking about how terrible it was what happened to George Floyd and how the Department of Justice was looking into it. If We are all going to be subject to the whims of the mob whenever an injustice happens. In the case of New York or LA or Dallas, how many thousands of miles away is this incident that then is justifying burning down stores and attacking people in the streets? You can't believe in justice and then have the elimination of culpability, the elimination of guilt, of due process. You can't believe in justice, have that as your rallying cry, and think that you then have the right to attack anyone you wish, to destroy anything you want. Do you think that the lib journos out there have in any way rallied to the cause of civilization? Because that is what we're in right now. This is a fight for our civilization, for our society. No, they keep focusing in on the mostly peaceful protests. Well, here's an example of how that goes. A CNN anchor on live TV was talking about how the riots going on in Minneapolis that he was near were entirely peaceful. And then this happened. Play clip 1.
And it's now just sort of a merry caravan. It is worth pointing out that it has been entirely peaceful, sometimes angry, but entirely peaceful. A few people doing some graffiti. When others saw them doing the graffiti, they would shut them down, make them stop doing it. Bottle thrown, which is not uncommon. So there is some of that, but for the most part, they have been very, very peaceful. They haven't been destroying anything. They like to take it out of the media, as everybody does.
Our elite journo class is a problem for America. They're a net negative at this point. They are damaging to the public. How else can you describe what happened there? A CNN anchor saying on live TV that, it's entirely peaceful, before he can finish the paragraph he's in the middle of saying, he gets a bottle thrown at him. It's entirely peaceful. Ow! Except for what just happened when I said it was peaceful. And it's peaceful except for the graffiti writing and the profanity being screamed and the threats and the just the obscenities and the vulgarities and the destruction of property and the menacing of the public that's going on. Other than that, entirely peaceful. I'm going to tell you, I had over the weekend a tweet that the President of the United States retweeted, which, as you know, can sometimes lead to a whole bunch of targeting by the psychotic left. And this one, I think you could say, has now gone mega viral, but it is the truth. It is the distilled truth of our situation right now. And it is that this isn't going to stop until the good guys are willing to use overwhelming force against the bad guys. The president retweeted that one. Now, this is very straightforward, isn't it? I'm not saying that anyone should use violence against peaceful protesters, quite the contrary. Bad guys are people who attack human beings, who destroy property, who break the law. And they cannot be allowed to have their own force escalation procedures that they have developed as part of this Antifa movement, but the far left protest groups have been doing this stretching back to Occupy Wall Street and well before that. They are not and should not be in a position to use force against police, to use force against law enforcement and get away with it. Anytime someone throws a brick at cops, that person should be immediately put into custody. And that means, if necessary, using there's a reason that the police have batons. There's a reason the police have pepper spray. That person has to be subdued with the minimum necessary force, but the force that is necessary, and put into handcuffs or flex cuffs and taken into custody. That's it. Until we have a restoration of that basic principle, this will not stop because the mob has been empowered. They're emboldened. And it's going to get uglier. People have already gotten really severely injured. Businesses, who knows how many at this point, looted, burned out, destroyed. How could anyone feel safe in a city anywhere in the country right now when cities are overwhelmingly the sites of this kind of violence, these outrages. How could anyone think that this is acceptable? There are people, the celebrity class, we have the most feckless, stupid, immoral, cowardly celebrity class of any society that you could point to in history. These people who have become so wealthy and so influential and really are mostly just lucky and have used the system in every way they could to benefit themselves, they turn around and now, because it makes them feel good, because of their addiction to virtue signaling, they don't care if your business is burned down or destroyed. They don't care if you or your neighbor is attacked by the angry mob, because people are hurting. That's what we're told. Not the people that are getting bricks thrown through their windows or hitting them in the heads as they're trying to walk down the street and want no part of this. Their hurt doesn't seem to matter. But this celebrity bailout fund, they're bailing out mobs that are destroying people's lives, that are terrifying human beings who are entirely innocent. And the celebrities are paying for this? My friends, we are in a war for our country. We are in a war with the forces of disorder, of anarchy, of destruction, with the left. The American left has become toxic. It has become a force that seeks to destroy everything that is worthwhile, everything that we have built. They hate Donald Trump, as you know. This has all become very political. And if we don't stop them, they will ruin the country that you and I live in. It will be gone. Now, hopefully, in a matter of days, the forces of order will prevail. Hopefully, you'll see governors and mayors and the federal government, where necessary, step in and stop this mayhem. But what signal does it send to the rest of us that this could even happen after we've been told to lock down for months? After we have been told that if you gather in large groups, you are putting people's lives at risk because of COVID-19. Do you see anyone right now in the media who supports these awful, destructive, and hateful riots? Do you see anyone saying what we were all told? If you don't wear a mask and if you don't social distance, you're irresponsible. There are rioters not wearing masks. Some of them wear masks because it's a benefit for them. You can't tell who they are. But a lot of them don't wear masks. They don't social distance, obviously. They're gathering in huge groups. The protesters are gathering in huge groups. The authorities would not allow people for months, to go to church, to see loved ones, to see family. In Michigan, they prevented you from going from one house to another house that you own. Can't open your businesses. If you try, if you want to cut hair, maybe you'll see 4 or 5 customers over the course of the day. No, they'll arrest you. You want to take your kids to the park? They'll arrest you. But if you want to gather in a mass of 1,000, screaming profanities, graffitiing sacred religious institutions, graffitiing the World War II memorial in D.C., these people have respect for nothing. For nothing. They are vicious and vile nihilists. But if you want to do that, you'll have Democrats, leftists, defending your right to assemble all of a sudden. Oh, so the First Amendment counts if you're a stupid, destructive, and vile rioter, but your right to assembly and your religious freedom doesn't matter when Governor Cuomo and Governor Newsom and all the rest are worried about COVID, and it's not up to you and your own risk. You might spread it to someone else. Things have gotten very, very ominous. We can either stand up, make our voices heard, and get ready for the fight ahead, or let the lunatics take over. That's where we are. There is no third choice.
I understand the pain that people are feeling, We support the right of peaceful protesters, and we hear their pleas. But what we are now seeing on the streets of our cities has nothing to do with justice or with peace. The memory of George Floyd is being dishonored by rioters, looters, and anarchists. The violence and vandalism is being led by Antifa and other radical left-wing groups who are terrorizing the innocent, destroying jobs, hurting businesses, and burning down buildings.
Tens of thousands of people across the country involved in these riots and the looting, at least. Who knows what the real number is, but thousands upon thousands of them. Have you seen, and I want you to remember this because you will never have this focus from the media, have you seen a single MAGA hat? Just one. On any of the people running out of stores, clutching expensive handbags or sneakers or whatever it is that they've gone into the store to loot. Have you seen one person wearing a MAGA hat? I've seen plenty of people wearing, A for Anarchy symbols. That's out there. So we know that and Antifa, the so-called anti-fascists, they name themselves. It's an intentional misnomer because they actually are the fascists. Do what we say or we will, as a mob, threaten you, destroy you, take from you. That's fascism. They are not. There is no defense against fascism. In fact, the president of the United States, if he were fascistic in intent, had the biggest opening anybody could ever imagine with what's happened here with COVID-19. And if anything, he gave more authority to the states than I think he should have. If anything, he was a little too hands-off. But he's a fascist? This is risible. These people are morons. But the wealthy journos and celebrities and Hollywood elites and all the rest that cheer this stuff on, they know that ultimately it won't affect them. They live in gated communities, or they can retreat out to the Hamptons or to Martha's Vineyard. They don't have to actually deal with this. And even if somebody were to break into a store that they have a part ownership of, or a restaurant where they're a silent partner, whatever it may be, they've got plenty of money. They don't care. You know who gets hurt the worst by what's going on right now? The very working people, including a lot of minorities in these neighborhoods where the riots are occurring, that the left pretends to care about. Here's the little secret. The left doesn't give a crap about people. It is just the harnessing of mob mentality for power and self-indulgent rage. That's what's happening. They have no coherent political philosophy. What are the demands that they want? What are we supposed to do? You want to abolish police forces? Oh, well, that's going to be interesting. And they may want to rethink that one, considering that you have a whole lot of people that don't see eye to eye with them on politics who also believe in the Second Amendment and won't allow the looting of their stores.
As we come together in the fight for justice, as we fight against racism, as we fight against massive unemployment and poverty, right-wing demagogues exploit moments like this to tear us apart and reinforce systems of racism and oppression. At this critical moment in our nation's history, at a time when we need a president who brings us together against injustice, we have a president who is opportunistically moving us down a path toward authoritarianism.
The president, according to Bernie Sanders, number 2 in the running for the Democrat presidential nomination. The president is moving toward authoritarianism? It's not possible that Bernie Sanders is that stupid. I mean, the guy is deeply unimpressive, but it's not possible he's that dumb. So what's really going on here? Well, in the old expression about a demagogue, it's that a person who knows what he's saying to be untrue, speaking to a room of people he knows to be idiots. That's what Bernie Sanders does. He lies and tells the left-wing mob what it wants to hear. The right is exploiting this. The right, of which I am a part. That's right. I am right-wing. I am conservative. That's just the way that it is. The right wanted our country to not be under authoritarianism of governors shutting down restaurants with their stupid mask policies, with their ridiculous social distancing. I've been saying this for weeks and weeks and weeks. The science doesn't support it. You know what you're starting to see now? Everyone go, oh, wow. You mean we can gather in thousands and thousands and there's not some big surge in cases? And if you can get 1,000 people together on the street screaming about how cops are racist murderers, I think you could probably risk putting 100 people in a church somewhere, right? Not according to the left. No. Looting and rioting and arson and firebombing police vehicles, that's essential, you could say, in the left's formulation. But opening a business, paying your own bills, having autonomy, having basic freedom, that's not essential. That doesn't count. That's up to the whims of Cuomo and de Blasio and Newsom and Whitmer and Murphy in New Jersey, all these different governors with their appallingly stupid policies that now all of a sudden we've just forgotten about this. I'm going to return to the COVID issue in a little bit because, guys, they were all lying to you. Remember, it was all about, Cuomo, if you don't wear a mask, you're basically killing people. So wear a mask. Why do you wear a mask? A mask is a thing, right? We had this going on for weeks. Do you think he's going to give a lecture to the protesters? Excuse me, I understand you want to burn down a building. Okay. Let's talk about this. If you're going to burn down a building, you got to maintain 6 feet of social distance. If you don't maintain 6 feet of social distance, you're putting people at risk. Forget about the burning of the building. I mean the COVID risk. You could put somebody in jeopardy, in danger. You might, aerosolize virus. So look, put the Molotov cocktail down for just a second. Step 3 or 4 more feet away, and then continue your arson spree and your destruction of our society. Thanks, Cuomo. Good job. Glad to see you're on the case. Everything that I've told you about COVID-19 here has been true. This is the greatest lie since the Russia collusion, and in some ways a much more damaging one. If you are wondering what this is all going to do, I have to tell you, no one can really understand all the implications of this. I have some people saying, well, this will help Trump because of the law and order vote. And I say, well, no, there's not law and order. The president, who has been very gracious and very generous to me, particularly in recent weeks, I found myself asking last night, where is our president on this one? As much as I appreciated the retweet, although it was just a mass of social justice lunatics coming at me as a result of it. Once you get in, over 150 or 140,000 likes and all this other stuff, every lunatic on the planet is seeing your stuff. But where is the president on all this? You have Bernie Sanders saying right-wing demagogues are exploiting this. I'd like to see a little more Trump out there explaining why this needs to stop. Where is our fighter? This is the moment that we need him more than any other we have seen. Where is that guy that we elected that won't back down? Now, I'm not saying he's gone. By the time you hear this, he may have given one hell of an oration calling out the fraudulence that's at the heart of all these riots and the way the media covers it. Oh, and the media, they're such a bunch of disgraces. They really are. I called it last night. Just if you want, pop in on CNN for a second, and you'll see exactly what I'm telling you is going to happen here is going to happen. You'll see people who will have no shame whatsoever at MSNBC, at CNN, on any of these lib channels. They're going to feign concern over the, quote, violence from all sides. It's not from all sides. It's leftists. If we're really talking politics here, it's Biden voters burning all this stuff down and looting the stores and throwing rocks at cops. It's not Trump voters. We all know that. Now, maybe some of them are actually registered members of the American Communist Party. I'm not saying every single one of them, and a lot of them probably don't vote at all. But if you're looking for political affiliations here, this is a Democrat left anarchy. We all know it. But they're going to, over on the various channels, they're going to feign concern over violence from all sides and focus on, quote, raising awareness and having tough conversations. What they will not do with their national platforms, with their legacy media outlets, with built-in massive advertising just showered on them every year, even though their shows suck and their viewership is full of imbeciles. What they won't do is call out the evil rioters for this violence and destruction. They won't do that. You can bet on it. But there'll be a lot of talk of, oh, maybe we should just try to focus on the way to heal for a moment here. What they're really waiting for is one incident of a cop who, in response to being spat on or hit with a rock or all the things that are going on routinely all over the country, night after night right now, they're waiting for one cop who goes too far. I saw a video in Baltimore of a woman who punched a police officer, squared up with him, punched him in the face twice. And a fellow officer came up behind this woman and punched her. Now, maybe he could have tackled her to the ground. Maybe there was a better way, but there needed to be a force escalation there. He didn't draw his weapon on her. There needed to be some force used. If you're a woman and you go at the cops with a knife, you don't get to say, oh, well, I wasn't sure I was going to use it on them to actually kill a police officer. They're going to have to defend themselves. Now, she didn't have a knife. I understand that. But I'm saying there's clearly, even when a male officer is attacked by a female assailant, there's going to have to be the use of force. And that officer in Baltimore has already been, I believe, placed on leave and might get fired. The one who punched the person who punched a fellow officer twice in the face. How many of you think that if you went up to a cop and swung and connected twice, square in the jaw, think that you would be gently asked to stop and put your hands behind your back, please, and no force used? The answer is zero, because no one who listens to this show is a left-wing dumbass. But there are a lot of people out there who seem to think that law enforcement is not based upon force and the use thereof. There are plenty of things where I wish I could just tell the cops, no, I'm sorry, not gonna abide by that one. If I get pulled over for a speeding ticket, I'm not getting pulled over. What are you going to do? You can't use force against me. What happens? Take that. That's a perfect example, actually. What happens if you get pulled over for a speeding ticket and when the officer comes up, you just decide to take off? Does the officer say, it's I don't have to drive really fast. That seems like a lot of effort, and it's just a speeding ticket. And no, they're gonna track you down, because if people believe that they can violate the law with impunity, our society is actually crumbling, right? So that they enforce the law. That's why we have it. But like I said, no MAGA hats on any of the people involved in this, which you won't hear the media say that, but I think it's certainly noteworthy. And then there's also a point I wanted to make to you, because there's so much going on here, and the lib media is atrocious on all of this. They are absolutely disgusting. And I will tell you this, all of the blue checks is what we call the verified journalists you'll see on Twitter in particular. Every single one of them currently posturing as a radical, cheering on rioters to attack police officers as some kind of retribution. Every single one of them, every celebrity. I said, Steve Carell and Justin Timberlake, and these people are sending bail money to riot. They're not arresting peaceful protesters, you morons. They're arresting people that are breaking the law. So you're encouraging rioting and looting. But the moment any of those just quislings, just abject, knee-shaking cowards had an angry mob outside their mansion in Malibu or Santa Monica or in Beverly Hills, the moment that happened, they would call the cops begging for help. Begging. But right now it's all the cops are getting what they deserve. Yeah, power to the people. No justice, no peace. Among the dumbest things I heard over the weekend, this was a chant that I just happened to come across. Silence is violence. No, you morons. Violence is violence. And claiming that silence equals violence is actually to debase what real violence is, and also to claim that you have the right to use violence against those who will not go along with you. It is inherently coercion. Agree with me, or you are engaged in an act of violence. That's what that means. Well, if that's the case, then they are justified in using violence against you. All of this comes from the coordination of left-wing groups online, on social media, all this Antifa stuff that you see. Antifa's been around for years, as we know. They are largely white, upper middle class, college-educated kids. There was two people in New York City arrested for throwing attempting to throw a Molotov cocktail, which, I mean, that could burn someone alive. For those who don't know, the Molotov cocktail was named because Molotov was the foreign secretary of the Soviet Union. And during the Soviet Union's invasion of Finland, which was a much more brutal affair than the Soviets expected, the Finns referred to this way of attacking Soviet armor, which they did not have themselves in a way where they could really fight back effectively, but they would throw Molotov cocktails at Soviet troops and Soviet mechanized infantry. It's a weapon of war. They always talk about this. Molotov cocktail breaks next to you, you'll catch on fire and slowly and horrifically die. And there are little morons running around New York City who went to elite schools. I believe one of them went to Princeton. Another went to Fordham Law School. I think one of them went to, it might have been Harvard. I have to check the schools, but they went to elite schools. Member of the New York Bar, throwing a Molotov cocktail at a police van. One of them is going to one of these incidents is going to involve murder. There's already a cop who was killed in Oakland, a Federal Protective Service officer who was killed by somebody who just drove up to a federal building and shot a whole bunch of people standing outside it who were clearly employees there. They'll say, of course, "Oh, you don't know that was tied to the protests." Really, we're going to play that game now. We're going to feign stupidity. Oh, that's what the media will do. Remember, they've had a hand in this. They have stoked the fires. They have pushed this rage. Stelter and Tapper and Maddow and Scarborough and the New York Times and the Washington Post, and these people have given cover to these riots. They pretend that they have some emotional connection to the pain that is felt. Really? The closest they ever get to these neighborhoods they see on fire is sitting in their mansions in the Hamptons on the flat screen. But they really care. They really care about poor and downtrodden minority communities. They also care about the crime that is the real threat. You want to talk about what threatens minority communities across the country when it comes to violence? It's not police violence. It's crime. It's drug dealers. It's gangs. That's the real threat. And anybody who's being honest knows that. But no, let's focus in on the aberrant behavior or the aberrant bad cop, the rare incident. I'm not saying it doesn't exist. Of course it exists. And it happens to people of all races and ethnicities as well, which the left pretends is not the case. It absolutely is the case. Type in, if you want, Daniel Shaver, and then write my name, Buck Sexton. I wrote a piece for The Hill a few years ago on the most horrific execution by cop I have seen, with the only one that really comes close to it is the one in South Carolina where a guy was running away from an officer. But that happened. That was murder. But in the case of Daniel Shaver, he was begging and pleading for his life, literally on his knees. And two officers with AR-15s had them trained on him and lit him up. Just shot him multiple times at almost point blank range, just because they were psychopaths. They actually got off. They were charged. They got off. No one was rioting after that. No one burned down anyone's buildings or... Justice is not perfect, but if you adhere to justice, then you also understand that rioting negates whatever cause you think you have. You'll see a little bit of a retrenchment today, a little bit of a pullback from some quarters on the left because it was so horrific over the weekend. You know what they'll say? Don't allow the occasional bad actor in the protest. Don't allow the occasional person stepping out of line here or there to undermine the peaceful protests across the country. Isn't that such an interesting? It's of course not true. There were riots in over 140 cities and looting, and it's mayhem. And that, as I've said, sure, when Lincoln was assassinated, it was mostly a theatrical production, but that's not really what people remember, is it? If that's true, why is it then also not the case that you shouldn't judge the entire police force, which is about 700,000 or 800,000 Americans, by the actions of one man in Minnesota, in Minneapolis? Oh, they don't have an answer for this, do they? But they'll probably just throw some more rocks